Twins of Reddit, what's your worst case of mistaken identity? I go to the same grocery store every week with my wife, Sarah. It's our Saturday routine. We never thought much of it until one day, everything changed. We were checking out like usual. I was loading bags into our cart when I noticed the cashier kept looking at Sarah funny. She seemed nervous, like she wanted to say something, but couldn't quite get the words out. As I finished up with the bags, the cashier finally spoke up. "Mrs. Johnson, can I talk to you for a minute?" She asked Sarah quietly. I watched as Sarah followed her a few steps away. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw Sarah's face change. Her eyes got big and her mouth fell open. When Sarah came back, she looked upset. "What's wrong?" I asked. She shook her head, looking confused. "The cashier just told me she's seen you here multiple times with another woman." I was shocked. I had no idea what she was talking about. Then it hit me. My twin brother Mike and his wife shop here too. The cashier must have seen him and thought it was me. I started laughing, which probably wasn't the best reaction. Sarah looked even more upset. I quickly explained about Mike, and slowly, Sarah started to smile. Before I read story 2, I want to ask you to please like and subscribe to our channel. It helps a lot with the algorithm. Thank you. Story 2. Back in high school, I dated this guy named Jake. He wasn't just any guy, he had an identical twin brother, Matt. It was pretty cool, but sometimes it caused funny mix-ups. Both Jake and Matt had girlfriends at our school. I was Jake's girlfriend, and a girl named Lily was dating Matt. We all hung out together a lot, so most people knew about the twins. One day, this new kid Alex started at our school. He didn't know about Jake and Matt being twins yet. I was sitting in class, minding my own business, when Alex came up to me. He looked really nervous, like he was about to tell me my dog died or something. "Hey," he whispered, "can I talk to you for a sec?" I nodded, wondering what was up. He pulled me to the side of the room. "I don't know how to say this," Alex said, looking at the floor, "but I think I saw your boyfriend with another girl. They were holding hands and everything." For a second I was confused. Then it hit me. He must have seen Matt with Lily. I tried not to laugh as I explained about the twins. Alex's face went from worried to relieved to embarrassed in about 2 seconds flat. "Oh man," he said, "I feel so dumb." I told him not to worry about it. Later, I told Jake and Matt what happened. We all thought it was hilarious. The story spread around school pretty quick, and soon everyone was teasing Alex about it. Poor Alex was super relieved to hear there was no cheating going on. After that, he became good friends with Jake and Matt. He'd joke that he was the only one who could always tell them apart, because he'd never mistake Jake for the cheater again. Story 3. My friend Sarah told me this crazy story about her and her twin sister Emma. It happened when they were in college. One night, Sarah and Emma were heading to see a play on campus. As they walked, Emma suddenly said, "Hey, I know a shortcut through this building." Sarah wasn't sure about it, but Emma seemed to know where she was going. So Sarah just shrugged and followed her sister. They walked through the quiet building, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Then out of nowhere, Emma stopped in front of a classroom door. "Let's check this out," Emma said with a mischievous grin. Before Sarah could ask why, Emma pushed open the door and went inside. Sarah followed, not knowing what to expect. As soon as she stepped into the room, Sarah's jaw dropped. The walls were covered in paintings, and every single one showed what looked like Sarah, completely naked. Sarah's face turned bright red. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her heart was racing as she tried to make sense of it all. Then Emma started laughing. "Surprise," she said. "I posed for an art class. What do you think?" It turned out Emma had been the model for a nude painting class and thought it would be funny to show Sarah like this. Sarah didn't know whether to laugh or yell at her sister. As they left the room, Sarah shook her head, still in shock. "Only you would think this was a good surprise," she told Emma. They barely made it to the play on time, and Sarah couldn't focus on the show at all. She kept thinking about those paintings and how weird it was to see herself, well, her sister, like that. Story 4. Back in high school, I had these friends who were twins. Let's call them Mike and Tom. We all ended up going to the same college, which was pretty cool. One day, I was eating lunch with Mike outside the campus cafe. We were just chilling, talking about classes and stuff, when this random guy walks up to our table. "Hey man, how's it going?" the guy says to Mike, grinning like they were old buddies. Mike smiles back and starts chatting with him. They talked about all sorts of things. Classes, parties, even some people I didn't know. I sat there, kind of confused, wondering how Mike knew this guy. After a few minutes, the guy says goodbye and walks off. I turned to Mike, about to ask how he knew that dude. But before I could say anything, Mike looks at me, shrugs, and says, "I have no idea who that was." Then he just goes back to eating his sandwich like nothing weird happened. I burst out laughing. It hit me that the guy must have thought Mike was Tom. And Mike, being the smooth talker he is, just rolled with it the whole time. Mike told me later that he and Tom did this kind of thing all the time. They were both super friendly and could talk to anyone, so they'd often pretend to be each other when people mixed them up. After that day, I started noticing how often it happened. Sometimes they'd tell people they were twins, but other times they'd just go along with whatever the person thought. It was like a game to them. Story 5. My twin sister Jenny started working at Walmart a few weeks before I did. When I got hired too, we knew we were in for some fun. On my first day, something hilarious happened. Jenny had an early shift and I was just coming in as she was leaving. We ran into each other at the back door. Now, nobody at the store knew Jenny had a twin. So imagine their shock when they saw two identical people trying to go through the same door. Without thinking, I yelled, "We're never supposed to be in the same place at the same time." Then I took off running. You should have seen the looks on people's faces. They were totally freaked out. Jenny told me later that everyone was talking about it all day. But that was just the beginning. My favorite thing to do was mess with customers. Jenny had just helped in the electronics section. They'd come up to me looking confused and ask, "Hey, didn't I just see you over there?" I'd put on my most serious face and say, "No, I've been here all day." The customers would look so puzzled. Some would argue, insisting they'd just talk to me. Others would shake their heads like they thought they were going crazy. Jenny and I had a blast with it. We'd swap stories at the end of our shifts about the funniest reactions we'd gotten. One time, a guy got so confused he went to find a manager to complain about the teleporting employee. The manager, who knew about us by then, just laughed and explained. Working at Walmart wasn't always fun, but having a twin there made it way more interesting. It was like we had our own little prank show going on every day. Story 6. I have an identical twin brother named Jake. We look exactly alike, except for one big difference. Jake shaves his head completely bald, while I still have some hair, even though it's thinning a bit. One night, I went to a party at a friend's house. Jake was coming too, but he was running late. When I got there, I saw his girlfriend Sarah sitting on the couch. I gave her a quick hug to say hi, then went to hang out on the other side of the room. I noticed this guy, Tim, who's friends with both Jake and Sarah. He kept looking at me, then at Sarah, then back at me. His face was all scrunched up like he was trying to solve a really hard math problem. For about 15 minutes, Tim kept glancing around the room nervously. Every few minutes, he'd pull out his phone and start texting like crazy. I wondered what was up with him, but I figured he was just being weird. Finally, Jake showed up. He walked in, gave Sarah a kiss, and said hi to everyone. That's when Tim completely lost it. He jumped up and yelled, "Jesus!" Was no one going to say anything? What the fuck was that? Everyone at the party turned to stare at him. Tim's face was bright red as he pointed at me and Jake. "I thought he grew a full head of hair in a day," he shouted. The whole room burst out laughing as they realized what happened. Poor Tim had spent the last 15 minutes thinking Jake had somehow magically grown hair between hugging Sarah and sitting down across the room. Jake and I couldn't stop laughing. We explained about being twins and how Jake shaves his head while I don't. Tim looked so relieved, but also pretty embarrassed. For the rest of the night, people kept coming up to ask us about it. Tim joked that he thought he was going crazy or that someone had spiked his drink. Story 7. Back in high school, I had the biggest crush on this girl named Emma. She was smart, funny, and super pretty. I thought we were really hitting it off in our English class. She'd always chat with me and laugh at my jokes. But then in math class, things got weird. When I'd try to talk to Emma, she'd look at me like I was speaking in another language. She didn't seem to remember any of our conversations from English class. I was so confused. One minute, Emma was all friendly and chatty. The next, She acted like she barely knew me. I started to think maybe she was playing some kind of trick on me, or worse, that I was going crazy. This went on for months. I'd get my hopes up in English class, thinking Emma liked me back. Then in math, I'd feel totally crushed when she gave me the cold shoulder. One day, after school, I was walking home when I saw Emma up ahead. I jogged to catch up, ready to ask her what was going on. But as I got closer, I saw, "Emma?" I stopped dead in my tracks. There were two of them, two Emmas, standing right in front of me. Without thinking, I blurted out, "There's two of you." They both turned and looked at me, then started laughing. That's when I learned that Emma had an identical twin sister, Olivia. Emma was in my English class, and Olivia was in my math class. I felt so dumb. For 4 whole months, I'd been crushing on 2 different girls, thinking they were the same person. Story 8. So get this. I have an identical twin brother named Tom. We both went to school with my wife, Sarah. After we finished school and passed our exams, we all got jobs at the same place. Talk about a small world, right? Now, there were some rules about family members working together, so I couldn't work in the same unit as Sarah. But Tom could. It was pretty cool, actually. We'd all take lunch breaks together and hang out at work. But here's where it gets funny. There was this social worker, let's call her Miss Johnson. She just couldn't wrap her head around the fact that Tom and Sarah weren't the married couple. I mean, Tom and I look exactly alike, so I guess I can see why she was confused. But still, it was pretty hilarious. Ms. Johnson would come up to me and say things like, "Oh, your wife and brother are so cute together." I'd try to explain, but she never seemed to get it. One time, she commented on a Facebook photo of Tom and Sarah saying, "What a beautiful couple." Sarah and I just looked at each other and cracked up. The best part was when Ms. Johnson started talking about my kids. She'd see pictures of them and tell me how much they take after their dad. But she was looking at Tom when she said it. We never got mad about it. It was all harmless, and we thought it was pretty funny. But man, Miss Johnson really doubled down on her mistake. She'd go on and on about Tom and Sarah being this perfect married couple. Tom, Sarah, and I would get together after work and laugh about Miss Johnson's latest mix-up. We even started a tally of how many times she'd say something about the wrong couple. Story 9. I married a guy named Mike, and he has an identical twin brother, Dave. They look so much alike that even computers get them mixed up sometimes. When Mike and I got engaged, we were super excited. We decided to get some fancy photos taken to celebrate. You know, the kind where couples look all lovey-dovey in a pretty park or something. The photos turned out great. Mike and I were smiling and hugging, looking all happy about getting married. I couldn't wait to share them with everyone on Facebook. So, I uploaded a bunch of these photos to Facebook. I was in such a hurry to show them off that I didn't look too closely at them after they were posted. Big mistake. A little while later, I started getting some weird comments. People were saying things like, "Congrats, Dave," and "I didn't know you and Dave were together." I was so confused. Dave? Why were people talking about Dave? Then it hit me. I checked the photos again, and sure enough, Facebook had gone and tagged Dave in almost all of our engagement photos instead of Mike. The computer thought it was being helpful, recognizing a face it knew. But it picked the wrong twin. So now it looked like I was getting engaged to my future brother-in-law instead of my actual fiancé. Story 10. My dad has an identical twin brother, my Uncle Bill. They look so much alike that even their own friends can't tell them apart sometimes. This led to a pretty crazy mix-up once. It all started when my dad was visiting London, England. He was walking down the street, holding hands with a woman. Nothing weird about that, right? Well, it turned out to be a big deal. See, one of my Aunt Mary's friends happened to be in London, too. This friend saw my dad and thought it was Uncle Bill. And remember, my dad was holding hands with a woman who wasn't Aunt Mary. The friend freaked out. She thought she'd just caught my uncle cheating on my aunt. Without even stopping to think, she grabbed her phone and called Aunt Mary right away. "Mary," she said, all worked up, "I just saw Bill walking down the street holding hands with another woman." Now here's the funny part. When Aunt Mary got this call, she was sitting right next to Uncle Bill in Ontario, Canada. They were thousands of miles away from London. Aunt Mary was confused at first. Then she started laughing as she realized what must have happened. She explained to her friend that it wasn't Bill in London, but his twin brother, my dad. The friend was so embarrassed. She'd caused all this drama over nothing. But everyone thought it was pretty funny once they figured out what happened. My dad still teases Uncle Bill about his wild time in London, and Aunt Mary's friend is a lot more careful about accusing people of cheating now, especially when twins are involved. Story 11. So I have this twin brother, Jake. We look exactly alike, but we're pretty different. For one thing, Jake had this huge secret stash of dirty magazines hidden in his closet. I always wondered how he got them, because that stuff's expensive, you know? Anyway, one night, me and my friends decided to grab some snacks from the convenience store near our house. No big deal, right? Wrong. As soon as I walked in, the guy behind the counter got all red-faced and angry. Before I could even say hi, he started yelling at me to get out. I was totally confused. What did I do? My friends were just as shocked as I was. They stayed behind to ask the guy what his problem was. That's when things got really weird. The clerk told my friends he'd caught me stealing those adult magazines last week. He said I'd stuffed a bunch under my shirt and ran out. I was stunned. I hadn't stolen anything. Then it hit me. It must have been Jake. He probably came in here pretending to be me and swiped those magazines for his collection. I didn't know whether to laugh or be mad. On one hand, it was kind of clever how Jake had pulled it off. On the other hand, now I was banned from the store for something I didn't even do. When I got home, I confronted Jake about it. He tried to deny it at first, but eventually he cracked up laughing and admitted everything. He thought it was hilarious that he'd gotten away with it, and I'd taken the fall. Story 12. My dad and uncle are twins, and it's pretty wild how alike they are. A few times a year, they show up to family dinners or each other's houses wearing matching outfits. They don't plan it, it just happens. At first, we thought it was funny, but now we're used to it. People mix them up all the time. Almost every week they have to tell someone, "No, I'm not him!" It can get pretty crazy. Once, someone thought my dad was having an affair because they saw him with my mom and thought it was my uncle. My dad had to explain to this drunk guy that he wasn't his brother. Talk about awkward. But the best story about them is from when they were kids. They were almost 3 years old and shared a room with 2 wooden beds. For Christmas, they got a toy tool set. My grandma says it wasn't even a month later when she went into their room and found a big mess. The beds were totally taken apart, bolts, boards, everything. My grandparents had no clue how it happened. They called a handyman to fix the beds. A few days later, the same thing happened again. My grandparents were super mad this time. They got rid of the wooden beds and bought 2 metal cots with springs. But that didn't stop my dad and uncle. About a week later, my grandma walked in to find one of the cots completely taken apart. The twins were working together on the second one. One was pulling the fabric while the other used a plastic toy hammer to pry out the springs. Needless to say, they lost their toy tool set after that. But it just goes to show how clever and mischievous they were, even as little kids. No wonder they still cause so much confusion as adults. Story 13. My grandma had a twin sister who looked just like her. Sadly, her sister died before I was born. Grandma didn't talk much about when they were little, but she did tell me one spooky story. When they were really young, Grandma was in their bedroom one night. She looked out the window and saw her sister standing outside in the dark. Grandma started talking to her, wondering why she was out there so late. But then she realized something weird. It wasn't her sister at all. It was her own reflection in the window. She had thought she was looking at her twin, but it was just herself. Years later, I was flipping through Grandma's old photo albums. I found some pictures that gave me the creeps. They showed her twin sister lying in a coffin. Those photos scared me for a long time. I couldn't get them out of my head. But then many years after that, my own grandma passed away. When I saw her in her coffin, it reminded me of those old photos. It was sad and strange to see Grandma like that, just like her sister had been all those years ago. Story 14. When my dad and uncle were about 6 years old, my grandpa was in the army, and they lived in Alaska. It was super cold there, with snow piled up higher than a person. One winter, they started having weird problems with their lights. The lights would get dim for a bit, then suddenly get bright again. This kept happening over and over, day after day. It was driving my grandma crazy. They called in an electrician to check things out, but he couldn't find anything wrong. The problem kept going for weeks. They even got another electrician to look, but he was stumped too. Everyone thought it might just be power surges or something like that. Then one day, my grandma went down to the basement. What she saw there shocked her. My dad and uncle were taking turns putting each other in the clothes dryer. They'd close the door and hit the start button for about 15 seconds. Then they'd open the door, switch places, and do it all over again. Grandma ran upstairs to the living room. Sure enough, the lights were dimming and brightening in the same pattern as the dryer turning on and off. My dad still remembers how it used to drive my grandma nuts. He says he never would have come up with such a crazy idea if he didn't have his twin brother. They were always on the same wavelength, thinking up wild schemes together. Story 15. When my brother and I were in 6th grade, something funny happened. We're twins and we look exactly alike. One day my brother felt sick and stayed home. It was weird because we'd always gone to school together before. I was walking down the hall at school, minding my own business. Suddenly, a teacher I'd never seen before grabbed me and pulled me aside. She started yelling at me, and I mean really yelling. She was super mad because she thought I had skipped her class. And now here I was, walking right past her classroom, like nothing happened. I felt so awkward. I didn't know what to say, so I just blurted out, I have an identical twin brother. My name is Jay Sweat. But the teacher didn't believe me. She thought I was making up a lame excuse. I had to go find another teacher who knew about my brother. That teacher came and told the angry one that I was telling the truth. The look on her face when she realized her mistake was priceless. After that, the teacher never bothered me again. She was probably too embarrassed. This is the only really awkward thing that's happened because we're twins. Most of the time it's just fun to look alike. But that day, it sure caused a lot of confusion. Story 16. I have an identical twin sister, and we look so much alike that it can cause some really awkward situations. This one time it got super weird. My sister was dating a guy who was the president of a fraternity at our college. The frat was having a big party where everyone brought dates. My sister went with her boyfriend, and they set me up with one of his frat brothers. The party was fun at first, but things got messy later on. I lost track of my date in the crowd. The place was really dark, and everyone had been drinking a lot. Then, while my sister was in the bathroom, her boyfriend came up to me. He was super drunk and couldn't tell us apart. He put his arm around me, thinking I was my sister. When he tried to kiss me, I backed away fast. I told him I wasn't my sister, but he didn't seem to get it. Then he asked something that made my skin crawl. He wanted to know if I'd be okay with a threesome, with my own twin sister. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew I had to get out of there right away. I felt bad about leaving my date behind, but I just couldn't stay. It was way too gross and uncomfortable. Story 17. I used to work in a store, and we had lots of regular customers. There was this one girl who always came in, and she was super cool. She loved our stuff, and we'd always chat about what she was up to. Sometimes she'd start the conversation, sometimes I would. Looking back, it's kind of embarrassing that I'd never really learned her name, even though that's pretty important in sales. I'd been seeing her for about a year and a half when something crazy happened. One day she walks in and I wave at her like usual. She waves back, all excited. Then, out of nowhere, an exact copy of her walks out from behind her. I'm not kidding, it was like seeing double. My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe my eyes. Turns out, I'd been talking to twin sisters this whole time, thinking they were the same person. For over a year, they even dressed alike, just in different colors. I was so confused. When I asked why they never told me, one of them said, "Well, you always talked to me like you knew me." So I just went along with it. Story 18. My sisters are twins, and they have this crazy story they love to tell. It's about one of their boyfriends and a big mix-up. This boyfriend had a weird mole on his butt cheek. He wanted to show it to his girlfriend, but he got the twins mixed up. Both my sisters hate gross stuff, so when he tried to show the wrong twin, she freaked out. The boyfriend thought she was just being squeamish like usual. Then things got really wild. The boyfriend started chasing the wrong twin around the kitchen with half his butt hanging out. Right then my dad walked in. He took one look, turned around, and walked right back out. Can you imagine how awkward that was? This boyfriend was a bit strange in other ways too. He loved eating raw vegetables, which isn't too weird for things like carrots. But he'd munch on raw onions, garlic, and even potatoes like they were apples or cupcakes. Who does that? The sisters begged him to get the mole removed, and he finally did. But the relationship didn't last. My sister lost him at the mall once and had to have him paged over the speakers like a lost kid. He got mad because it made him feel childish. Though to be fair, he was riding one of those little mall trains at the time, and he had her car keys. Story 19. Being a twin can lead to some pretty funny mix-ups. My whole life, I've had to dodge hugs and kisses meant for my brother. I'd yell, "Wrong one! Wrong one!" Sometimes my brother's girlfriend would even jump in my lap by mistake when we were watching movies. Oops! But the best story happened when we were grown up. My brother became a Marine officer, and I joined the Peace Corps. We were like characters in a TV show going in totally different directions. I was teaching in Eastern Europe, and one night I was having dinner with some locals. This guy there used to fly helicopters for the Soviet Army. He asked if I wanted to see his old uniform. When he brought it down, it was covered in medals and looked really cool. It fit me perfectly, so I tried it on and took a picture. I thought it was awesome, so I posted it online for everyone to see. A few days later, my brother called me. He was super mad. He was trying to get a special security clearance for his job, and someone found my picture. They thought it was him wearing a Soviet uniform. His bosses were giving him a hard time, and he was worried his clearance might get delayed. He yelled at me for causing trouble, but now we laugh about it. Story 20. In my country, there was a really messed up story about twins. It all started when two baby girls got mixed up at the hospital. One twin went home with the wrong family, while their real daughter stayed with the other twin. The girls looked totally different, but the families just thought they weren't identical twins. No one suspected anything was wrong for years. The truth came out when the girls were in high school. The real twins kept getting called by the wrong names, and strangers would say hi to them, thinking they were someone else. They lived in a small town, so eventually some friends figured it out and arranged for all three girls to meet. When they met, it was shocking. Two of the girls looked exactly alike, but they were totally different people. One of them even liked metal music and always wore black clothes, while her twin was completely different. This mix-up really hurt both families. They sued the hospital for making such a big mistake, but that didn't fix all the problems. Everyone was really upset about what happened. Story 21. My brother and I both entered the science fair. We're twins, so we look exactly alike. On the day of the awards, my brother got sick and couldn't go. So I went with just my mom. When they announced the winners, something unexpected happened. My brother won first place, but I didn't win anything at all. When they called his name, my mom made me go up to accept the award for him. There I was, standing on the stage. Everyone was clapping, my friends, my teachers, everyone. They put a medal around my neck and handed me a certificate. But it wasn't for me. It was all for my brother. I should have felt happy for him, but I didn't. Instead, I started crying right there on stage. It felt so weird. I think people thought I was just really happy, but I wasn't. When I got off the stage, I headed straight for the door. People kept saying, "Congratulations," and trying to shake my hand. They all thought I was my brother. "Way to go, my twin's name," they said. I felt so strange inside. I was jealous of my brother, but I also felt ashamed for feeling that way. It was like two emotions fighting inside me. I walked right past my mom and left the building. I couldn't stand being there anymore. Story 22. So I have a twin brother, which is pretty cool most of the time, but sometimes it can lead to some really awkward situations. This one time, it got super embarrassing. We were at the supermarket together, just doing some regular shopping. Now I guess from behind, we look exactly the same. But from the front, it's pretty obvious that I'm a girl and he's a boy. On this day, my brother's girlfriend happened to be shopping at the same store. She didn't know we were there too. She saw someone from behind who looked just like my brother and decided to play a little joke. She snuck up behind me, thinking I was my brother, and playfully smacked my bottom. Then she said, "Hey love," in a teasing voice. Now, I could have just turned around and explained the mix-up. But for some reason, my brain decided to be silly. I turned around and said, "Hey love," right back to her. The look on her face when she realized it was me, not my brother, was priceless. Her eyes got so big and her mouth dropped open. She turned bright red and looked like she wanted to disappear. I immediately felt bad for going along with the joke. It made things way more awkward than if I just explained right away. Story 23. I have two older brothers who are twins. One of them is married, or was anyway. This story is about them and how being twins led to a really awkward situation. One day, the married twin's wife had to have a small medical procedure. She needed someone to pick her up afterward, but her husband couldn't do it because of work. So the other twin brother offered to help out. When he picked her up, she was still pretty out of it from the medicine they gave her. In her confused state, she thought the brother who picked her up was actually her husband. Even when her real husband came home from work, she still believed the wrong twin was her husband. She got really upset because my brother, who wasn't her husband, wouldn't kiss her or tell her he loved her. You can imagine how weird that was for everyone. They finally got her to go to sleep, hoping she'd be back to normal when she woke up. When she woke up, she finally figured out what had happened. But sadly, that wasn't the end of their problems. For a while after that, she kept getting confused about who her husband was. She even ended up in other people's beds sometimes. My brother said it must have been some lasting effect from the medicine, but it caused a lot of trouble in their marriage. They ended up getting divorced, and now she's his ex-wife. Story 24. On my last day managing a restaurant, we hired a new girl. Even though I didn't work there anymore, I'd still go there to hang out. The new girl and I became friends. We'd have drinks, smoke, and sometimes I'd give her rides. We texted each other too. This went on for about a year. Then I started seeing her at a different place pretty often. She always seemed really happy to see me and would give me big hugs. It felt nice, like she really cared about me as a friend. But one day something weird happened. I saw her and everything seemed normal. We hugged like usual, but it felt different. I couldn't feel any of the usual warmth or friendliness in the hug. It really confused me. I thought maybe I was just imagining things, but it bothered me all week. The next week, I finally found out what was going on. I saw her again, but this time she was with her identical twin sister. I was so surprised, but also really relieved. It turns out this kind of mix-up happens to them all the time. The sister I didn't know would just pretend she knew me because it was easier than explaining the whole twin situation every time. Story 25. I'm not a twin, but I dated a guy who was. We were pretty serious for a while. His family really liked me because I was normal, unlike his ex-girlfriend who was younger than us and caused a lot of drama. We hung out a lot with his twin brother and the brother's girlfriend. It was fun and everything seemed great. But then weird things started happening. People would tell me they saw my boyfriend with another girl around town or at the movies. When I asked him about it, he'd always say, "Oh, they must have seen my brother." I believed him because, well, he had a twin who looked just like him. This went on for months, but it turns out he was lying the whole time. He never actually broke up with his ex-girlfriend, the one who caused all that drama before. One day, a friend texted me saying they saw my boyfriend at the mall when he was supposed to be at work. I decided to check it out myself. I went to the mall, found his car, and parked right next to it. Then I texted him, pretending I thought he was at work, and waited for him to come out. When I caught him, his parents were so mad at him for lying that they kicked him out of the house. Then, get this, they invited me over for tea to apologize for what their son did. Story 26. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. It's so funny, and I still laugh about it years later. Back when I was in school, I used to perform in musicals. You know, the kind with singing and dancing. I loved it. One time after a show, my twin brother came to see me. We had a greeting line where the audience could meet the actors. My brother got in line to say hi. Here's where it gets hilarious. My brother goes up to who he thinks is the lead actress and says, "Great job! Congrats! What a show!" But plot twist, it wasn't the lead actress at all. It was her twin sister. So the girl says, "Oh, I wasn't in the show actually. It was my twin sister. But you were fantastic." Now remember, this is my brother she's talking to, not me. My brother, looking confused, says, "I wasn't in the show either." Right at that moment, the real lead actress and I walk up. We find them both looking super confused, trying to figure out what just happened. It was like a comedy sketch. My twin brother had accidentally complimented the twin sister of the lead actress, thinking it was her. and she had complimented him thinking he was me. Story 27. My twin brother and I went to different high schools for our junior year. Even though we were at different schools, we still lived in the same city, only about 15 minutes apart. We'd always hang out on weekends and go to parties together. One night, we were at a house party with a bunch of our friends. Suddenly, this guy I'd never seen before comes up to me. He gets right in my face and starts asking if I have a problem with him. I was totally confused. I told him I didn't even know who he was and asked him to back off. But he wouldn't let up. Kept going on about me having a problem with him. Just then, my twin brother walks into the room. He gently moves me aside and says to the guy, "Bitch, I have a problem with you. Leave my brother out of this." You should have seen the look on that guy's face. He was so confused seeing two of us. Turns out, earlier that week at school, my brother and this guy, who was a senior, had bumped shoulders in the hallway. My brother didn't apologize, and I guess that really ticked the guy off. Pretty silly reason to start trouble, right? Thanks to my brother stepping in, we avoided a fight that night. The guy realized he'd been about to pick a fight with the wrong twin. Story 30. My mom has an identical twin sister, which means they look exactly alike. When they were kids, their parents always dressed them in matching outfits. My mom and her sister really didn't like this. They wanted to look different from each other. One year, when Halloween was coming up, they thought they had the perfect chance to finally wear different costumes. They came up with a clever plan. My grandpa took my mom shopping for a costume, while my grandma took my aunt to a different store. This way, they thought, there was no way they'd end up with the same costume. They were so excited when they got home. Both of them couldn't wait to show off their costumes to each other. They ran into their room to change, thinking they were finally going to look different. But when they came out of their room, surprise, they were wearing exactly the same costume. Can you imagine how shocked they must have been? After all that planning to be different, they still ended up matching. It was like the universe was playing a trick on them. Story 31. This isn't your typical twin mix-up story, but it's pretty funny. My twin and I are fraternal twins, which means we don't look alike at all. In fact, he's a boy and I'm a girl, so we're really different. One day, we were at an arcade with our younger brother. We were sitting on a bench waiting for our turn to play laser tag. A couple walked by and stopped to ask us, "Are you guys twins?" I got super excited. I jumped up and said, "Yes." Finally, someone realizes we're twins. How awesome. I was so happy that someone had noticed, but then I saw their faces. They looked totally confused. That's when my twin brother spoke up. He said, no, I think they meant me and our younger brother. Oops, talk about embarrassing. See, I'm only 5'5" tall, while my twin is 6'1". We look so different that people often ask if we're even related at all. So there I was, thinking someone had finally spotted us as twins, when they were actually asking about my brother and our younger brother, who look more alike than we do. Story 32. A while back I dated someone who had a twin brother. These twins were pretty different from each other, and often didn't get along very well. It's funny how things turned out for them. When they went to college, they started out studying totally different things. But by the end, they both ended up in the same major, electrical engineering. Go figure. By the time they graduated, they were really set on living separate lives. They wanted to be their own people, not just the twins. So they came up with this plan. They wouldn't tell each other where they were applying for jobs. They thought this would make sure they'd end up in different places. On the first day at his new job, my ex-boyfriend, one of the twins, was shown to his desk. It was in one of those office spaces with lots of little cubicles. He sat down, probably feeling pretty good about starting his new life. Then he looked up. Just 6 feet away in the next cubicle was his twin brother. Can you believe it? After all that effort to go their separate ways, they ended up working at the exact same company, in the same office, right next to each other. Story 33. I used to work as a nanny for 7-year-old identical twin boys. Their names started with D and B. It was always an adventure taking care of them after school. One day, the twins came up with a clever plan. They decided to wear exactly the same clothes to see if they could trick people into mixing them up. When they got off the school bus, they tried to fool me too. They asked me to tell them apart. I played along, pretending to study their faces really closely. I had them stand side by side so I could look at them carefully. I was just stalling for time, wondering how long they'd keep up their little game. After less than a minute, they started getting antsy. They began elbowing each other, probably getting impatient with my examination. Then, one of them accidentally gave away the game. He said, "B, stop!" As soon as he said his brother's name, they both knew their trick was over. They'd given themselves away. Story 34. My twin and I needed new glasses, so we went shopping together. The store we went to was huge. It had many big rooms filled with all kinds of eyeglasses from different brands. There were so many choices. We spent about 3 hours looking around. We didn't shop together, though. Each of us went off on our own to find the perfect frames. We wanted to pick something that matched our own style, not just get matching pairs. After all that time looking, we finally made our choices and went to pay. That's when something funny happened. The person at the checkout counter looked at our picks and said, "Oh, that's so awesome you chose the same pair." We were surprised and looked at each other's choices. Sure enough, we had picked the exact same model of glasses. The only difference was the color. I chose white, and my twin chose silver. Story 35. I have some friends who are triplets. That means there are 3 of them born at the same time. They all still live in the same town, which led to a pretty funny situation. All 3 of these brothers got their wives pregnant within about 2 years of each other. By chance, all 3 wives picked the same doctor to help them through their pregnancies. Here's where it gets funny. The doctor only knew the wives' names and their last name, which was the same for all 3 because they married brothers. The doctor never met the husbands or knew their first names. All 3 wives said the doctor was super rude and mean to them during their appointments. They couldn't figure out why. Then one day, 2 of the triplets had back-to-back appointments with their wives. When the doctor came in and saw both of them, he did a double take. He asked, "There's more than one of you?" The brothers replied, "Yeah, there's 3 of us. We're triplets." That's when everyone realized what had happened. The doctor thought one guy had gotten 3 different women pregnant. He thought this man was cheating on his wife with 2 other women, and they all ended up pregnant. Story 36. One day my aunt and uncle came over for dinner. My aunt was in the kitchen getting some food ready. Then something really funny and kind of awkward happened. My stepdad walked into the kitchen. He thought he saw my mom from behind. So he went up, hugged her, and even kissed her on the neck. But surprise! It wasn't my mom at all. It was my aunt. All my aunt said was "wrong sister." Can you imagine how red my stepdad's face must have gotten? Everyone else thought it was super funny. But my stepdad, he was so embarrassed. He kept apologizing for a long time after that. Story 37. When I was training to be a teacher, I worked with a class that had twin girls in it. They were super cute, but it was really hard to tell them apart at first. After a while, I finally figured out how to tell which twin was which. I was feeling pretty proud of myself for getting it right. So one morning, I confidently called them by their names. But to my surprise, they corrected me. I thought, okay, I must have mixed them up. So I made a mental note of what they were wearing to keep them straight for the rest of the morning. Later, we were going over a lesson, and I called on one of the twins. Let's call her Twin A. Suddenly, she started crying. She said, "I'm not Twin A, I'm Twin B." That's when we realized what had happened. The twins had decided to play a trick on us that morning by switching places. But then they got upset when we called them by the wrong name, even though that's exactly what they wanted us to do. After everything settled down, we all had a good laugh about it. When their mom found out, she couldn't believe it. She was shocked that they were already pulling the old twin switch trick in kindergarten. Story 38. At my middle school, we had 2 teachers who were identical twins. This led to some pretty funny confusion for me. These teachers looked exactly alike and even dressed similarly. For a while, I was totally stumped. I kept seeing what I thought was the same teacher in different parts of the school, like super quickly. It was mind-boggling. I couldn't figure out how one person could move around the building so fast. I'd see the teacher in one hallway. Then a few minutes later, I'd spot her on the other side of the school. It was like magic. I started to wonder if our teacher had some secret superpowers or something. Finally, someone clued me in. They told me there were actually 2 of them. They were twins. Talk about a dumb moment. I felt pretty silly for not figuring it out sooner. But here's the funny part. Right after I found out about the twins, one of them got pregnant. So even if nobody had told me, I would have figured it out pretty soon anyway. Story 39. I used to work with a guy who had an identical twin brother. But here's where it gets interesting. My coworker had kids 5 years before his twin did. This made a big difference in how they looked as they got older. Having kids can be pretty tiring, and it showed on my coworker. He started looking a lot older than his twin. The difference was so big that people started thinking they were just brothers, not twins. They assumed my coworker was the older brother. This led to some pretty funny mix-ups. My coworker liked to work out at the gym. Guys there who knew his twin would come up to him, thinking he was his brother. They'd say things like, "Man, you look like crap." Can you imagine how awkward that must have been? But it worked the other way around too. People would go up to his twin brother and say, "Wow, you look great." They thought they were talking to my coworker, not realizing it was actually his twin who didn't have kids yet. The difference between how they looked was crazy. It's like having kids aged my coworker super fast, while his twin still looked young. Story 40. I had a good friend in college named Ellie who had an identical twin sister. Ellie's sister had a boyfriend, but Ellie was happily single. One night, we were all at Ellie's sister's place, making dinner and having some drinks. Ellie went to get something from the fridge, so her back was turned to everyone. That's when something really awkward happened. The sister's boyfriend walked by and gave Ellie's butt a firm grab, thinking it was his girlfriend. Then he just went on his way to the kitchen counter to chop some vegetables. Ellie gasped and turned around. The whole room went quiet. We all just stared, waiting for the boyfriend to realize what he'd done. You could see the exact moment it hit him. His girlfriend wasn't the one at the fridge. She was actually on the other side of the room. The boyfriend slowly looked back down at his cutting board. He was so embarrassed he couldn't even look up. He kept saying sorry over and over. Ellie was shocked at first, but when she realized it was an honest mistake, she thought it was kind of funny. The poor boyfriend, though. Story 41. This funny and awkward thing happened to me about a year ago when I was living in Singapore. I was out having dinner with my girlfriend when something weird started happening. My girlfriend leaned over and whispered to me that a woman was walking around taking pictures of me. I looked over, and sure enough, this lady was trying to sneakily take photos of me. When the woman saw that I noticed her, she came over, looking really angry. She started asking me what I was doing and how I could cheat on my wife. I was totally confused. I'd never been married, and I had no idea who this woman was or who she was talking about. I told her I'd never been married, and she just stared at me for a moment. Then she asked, "Wait, are you my twin brother's name?" I said, "No, that's my brother." Suddenly, the woman's face turned bright red and she started apologizing over and over. It turns out she was on vacation and works with my sister-in-law, my twin brother's wife. My brother was on a work trip in China, not Singapore. This woman thought my brother was lying about where he was so he could meet up with my girlfriend and cheat on his wife. It was super awkward, but we all had a good laugh about it later. Story 42. My grandpa has a twin brother, which is pretty cool. Even though they're in their late 70s now, they still look almost exactly alike. This led to a funny moment when I was just a little kid. My mom told me about something that happened at a family reunion when I was a toddler. I was too young to remember it myself, but it's a great story. Picture this. My grandpa was holding me and chatting with my parents. Everything was normal. Then, all of a sudden, his twin brother walked up to us. Now imagine being a little kid and seeing two of your grandpa. I must have been so confused and amazed. My mom says my eyes got really big, and I blurted out, "Two grandpas!" I guess I thought I had hit the jackpot. In my little toddler mind, having two grandpas must have seemed like the best thing ever. Story 43. My twin and I had very different things going on in our lives. She had just joined the Navy and was at boot camp. Meanwhile, I was just doing regular stuff like grocery shopping. One day, I was walking around the grocery store when something crazy happened. This man came running up to me, looking super worried. He started yelling, "What in the hell are you doing here? You're gonna go to federal prison." I was totally shocked. At first, I thought he must be some random crazy person, so I tried to back away. But he kept following me. I told him, "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about." That's when he said my twin's name. Suddenly it all made sense and I started laughing. The man got even more upset and asked why I thought this was funny. So I explained, "I'm not who you think I am. I'm actually her twin sister." He didn't believe me at first. I had to pull out my ID to prove I was telling the truth. Once he saw it, he started apologizing like crazy. Then he explained who he was. He was the officer who helped my sister join the Navy. When he saw me in the store, he thought my sister had run away from boot camp, which would have gotten her in big trouble. Story 44. I'm not a twin, but I have a story about dating someone who was. It's a bit of a grown-up situation, so I'll be careful how I explain it. For years I was dating this guy on and off. We lived far apart, so we didn't see each other all the time. I'd known him for about 15 years, and in all that time, I was the only person he dated. One day, I found out something really shocking. The guy I was dating was involved in an inappropriate relationship with his twin brother and his twin brother's wife. It's hard to explain without getting into adult stuff, but basically, they were all doing things siblings shouldn't be doing together. At first, I couldn't believe it, but then I started thinking about things from the past, and a lot of stuff began to make sense, like how he spent so much time with his twin brother, and even more time with his twin brother's wife. Needless to say, we're not dating anymore. Story 45. This funny story is about my dad and his twin brother, my uncle. They look so much alike that even their wives, who've been married to them for over 20 years, sometimes get them mixed up. When they were in college, my dad was the star of a play. On opening night, my uncle came to watch the show. He saw a chance to play a really good prank. While my dad was in the bathroom, my uncle snuck backstage. He burst through the curtains and yelled, "That's it! I've had it. I can't work with these people anymore." Then he stormed off stage. The director of the play freaked out. He thought the star of his show was quitting on opening night. Nobody knew my dad had a twin brother, so they all thought it was really my dad having a meltdown. A few minutes later, my dad came back from the bathroom. He saw everyone's worried faces and figured out what happened. He said, "Yeah, my twin is coming tonight. He messed with you all, right?" Story 46. Growing up, I had a twin brother who looked just like me. We were in high school when I accidentally saw him without clothes on. I couldn't help but notice that his private parts were bigger than mine. It made me feel weird and curious at the same time. One day we decided to compare ourselves. We weren't trying to be weird or anything, just wondering if we were the same down there since we looked alike everywhere else. But when we checked, it was clear that his was definitely bigger than mine. This discovery bothered me a lot. I started to wonder if other twins had the same issue. Were we supposed to be exactly the same in every way? Why was my brother different from me in this one area? I felt embarrassed and didn't know who to talk to about it. It's not exactly something you bring up in everyday conversation. I kept thinking about it, wondering if I was normal or if something was wrong with me. Story 47. My twin brother and I look exactly alike. One day he went to the store to buy some wine. While he was gone, his girlfriend came over to our place. She thought I was him and didn't even notice the difference. I guess she was really excited to see him because right away she started kissing me. It happened so fast that I couldn't believe it. I was so shocked that I couldn't move or say anything. My brain was trying to catch up with what was happening. I knew I had to stop her and tell her I wasn't my brother. But just as I was about to push her away and explain, the worst thing happened. My brother walked in the door. He saw us there, his girlfriend kissing me. I can't even imagine what was going through his head at that moment. I felt terrible, even though I hadn't done anything wrong on purpose. Everything seemed to freeze. I didn't know what to say or do. His girlfriend looked confused, probably wondering how my brother could be at the door when she thought she was kissing him. I was scared about how my brother would react. Would he be mad at me? Would he believe that I didn't mean for this to happen? It was a mess, and I had no idea how we were going to sort it out. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. We all just stared at each other, waiting for someone to say something. I wished I could disappear or turn back time. It was one of those moments that you know will change everything, and not in a good way. Story 48. Our geography teacher had a twin brother who looked just like him. One time, the teacher didn't give grades to some students. This meant they had to take tests during summer break, which made them really angry. A group of these upset kids came up with a bad plan. They decided to get back at the teacher by hurting him. But they made a big mistake. They found the teacher's twin brother instead of the teacher himself. These kids did something really wrong. They attacked the twin brother, hitting him in the face. They hurt his nose so badly that they broke it. They also gave him a black eye, which is when the skin around your eye turns dark and swollen from being hit. The kids thought they had gotten their revenge on the teacher. They probably felt pretty proud of themselves, thinking they had taught him a lesson. But the next day at school, everyone got a big surprise. The geography teacher walked in looking just fine. He didn't have a broken nose or a black eye. He didn't have a single scratch on him. You can imagine how shocked those kids must have been. Their jaws probably dropped when they saw the teacher. They realized they had attacked the wrong person, an innocent man who had nothing to do with their grades or summer exams. The teacher acted like nothing had happened, because for him, nothing had. He had no idea what his poor brother had gone through because of the mix-up. Story 49. When I was little, my twin brother and I were starting kindergarten. Even though we're twins, we don't look alike at all. Our grandparents were helping us get ready for school, but they made a mistake. They put the wrong name tags on us, and we didn't notice. I was sitting in my class, thinking everything was normal. Then, out of nowhere, my teacher called out my brother's name and told me I was in the wrong class. I was so confused and scared that I couldn't say anything. The teacher took me to a different classroom and brought my brother back to mine. I felt like I had done something wrong, even though it wasn't my fault. Everything in this new classroom looked strange to me. I didn't know anyone there, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. After a few minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. All the unfamiliar faces and the weird feeling of being in the wrong place got to me. I started crying because I was so upset and didn't know what to do. Luckily, my brother's teacher figured out what had happened. She realized that our grandparents had mixed us up. She quickly sent us back to our real classrooms, where we belonged. Story 50. My girlfriend Jess has an identical twin sister named Tara. They look exactly alike and love to play tricks on people. The only way to tell them apart is by some small scars on Jess's wrist that Tara doesn't have. One day I was at their house watching TV with Jess. We were cuddling on the couch when she said she needed to use the bathroom. I didn't think much of it, but she was gone for a long time. When she came back after about 15 minutes, something felt off. I asked her a question about the show we were watching, which was her favorite. But she looked confused and nervous and just said, I don't know. That seemed weird to me. Jess usually knows everything about this show. I got suspicious and looked at her wrist. The scars weren't there. I realized what was going on. The twins had switched places on me again. They'd done this many times before. I said, "Nice joke, Tara. Where's Jess?" Suddenly, Jess jumped out from behind a wall, laughing really hard. Tara, who was sitting next to me, started laughing too. Jess said through her giggles, "It took you less time than usual to figure it out. Good job." Story 51. My twin brother and I go to the same college and study the same subject. It's funny because people often see us around campus, but don't realize we're twins. I guess we stand out a bit, and folks think they're just seeing the same person in different places. One day, something really interesting happened. I was walking around campus when a guy I didn't know came up to me. He looked nervous but excited to talk to me. He started telling me how much he admired me. He said he noticed how I always sit in the front of the class, show up every day, and seem really smart. He told me I always do well in class and that he looked up to me for that. At first I was confused. Then I realized he was talking about my twin brother, not me. You see, I don't go to class very often. My brother is the one who's always there, sitting up front and doing well. I didn't know what to say. Should I tell him the truth? Would he feel silly for mixing us up? I felt kind of proud of my brother for making such a good impression, but also a little embarrassed that I wasn't living up to the same standard. Story 52. I used to be friends with this girl who had an identical twin sister. They looked exactly the same clothes, same haircut, everything, but their personalities were totally different. One twin was super nice, the sweetest girl you could ever meet. The other twin was, well, let's just say she wasn't very nice at all. She was mean to everyone and seemed to enjoy it. One day at school, I thought the mean twin wasn't there. I didn't see both of them come in that morning, so I figured it was just the nice one. I went up to who I thought was the sweet twin to ask how her day was going. Big mistake. Out of nowhere, she slapped me in the face as hard as she could. I was shocked and confused. I asked, "What did I do?" That's when I heard her laugh. It was a mean laugh, the kind she always did when she hurt someone. That's when I realized I'd gotten the twins mixed up. It was the mean one all along. Later that day, I told the nice twin what happened. I thought she'd feel bad about it, but she just started laughing like I was telling a joke. Then she told me something that really surprised me. She said her sister wasn't really mean. She just acted that way around guys she liked. I couldn't believe it. The mean twin had slapped me because she liked me. It didn't make any sense to me. Why would someone hurt people they like? Story 53. I'm an identical twin, and my brother and I go to the same college. It can get pretty confusing sometimes, like this one time during our first year. I was walking around campus with my girlfriend when this girl I'd never seen before came up to us. She looked at me and my girlfriend and said, "Oh, so this is why you didn't want to call me back." At first, I didn't get what was happening. I didn't know this girl, so why would she think I was supposed to call her? Then it hit me. She must be talking about my twin brother. I tried to tell her she had the wrong guy, but she didn't believe me. She said, "No, I know it's you. We met in the dorms." That's when I realized my brother must have met her, and then stopped talking to her. I explained that I was actually my brother's twin, but things just got more awkward. She thought I was making up some crazy story to get rid of her. She looked really hurt and angry. To prove I was telling the truth, I had her call me on her phone. Of course, my phone didn't ring because she was actually calling my twin brother. She looked so confused when she saw this. My girlfriend was pretty upset at first. I think she thought maybe I was lying and had actually met this other girl. But as the whole thing played out, she started to see how funny and weird the situation was. If you like these stories, please like and subscribe and share any of your personal stories in the comments below. And if you have the time, watch one of the videos that are on your screen now. Thank you.